suggest that you're becoming mellow.
My mother would be glad to hear you say that.
Do you think men are important? Like for what?
Point, like what time of the day or the night or what were you doing when you thought, I'm going to take Cher's money?
She sold over 100 million records, ruled the charts across 7 decades, and reinvented herself so many times that the world stopped trying to keep count. Cher isn't just a singer or an actress, she's a force of nature. But behind the glittering gowns and record-breaking hits lies a story far darker than the spotlight ever showed. Her life has been shaped by betrayal, explosive feuds with Hollywood power players, and even allegations that rocked her family in ways no one expected. The legend of Cher isn't just about survival. It's about fighting back when the world thought she'd crumble, and what she's finally revealed has changed everything we thought we knew about her. Long before she was Cher, the global icon, she was Cherilyn Sarkisian, a girl from El Centro, California, who dreamed bigger than her small-town surroundings could contain. At 16, she dropped out of school, packed her ambitions, and set off for Los Angeles with little more than determination. That decision would change everything. In 1962, she met Sonny Bono, a man nearly a decade older who was working for record producer Phil Spector. He became her mentor, her partner, and soon her husband. Together, they formed one of the most unlikely yet unforgettable duos in music history. With Sonny's quirky energy and Cher's striking contralto voice, they created a sound that stood out in the crowded 1960s pop scene. Their breakout hit, I Got You Babe, released in 1965, didn't just top the charts. It became an anthem of the decade, making Sonny and Cher household names overnight. The success didn't stop there. They reinvented themselves as television stars with the Sonny and Cher Comedy Hour, which debuted in 1971. Millions tuned in every week to watch the couple's playful banter, Cher's dazzling Bob Mackie gowns, and the chemistry that made them seem inseparable. But Cher wasn't content to be just one half of a duo. Even then, she was carving out her identity, releasing solo hits like Gypsies, Tramps, and Thieves, which proved she could stand on her own. Her music was brash, unapologetic, and laced with themes of survival, perfectly reflecting the woman she was becoming. By the 1980s, Cher had moved beyond the limits of pop stardom. She turned to Hollywood and shocked critics who had dismissed her as a lightweight. Her dramatic performances in Silkwood and Mask earned her respect, but it was her role in Moonstruck in 1987 that sealed her status as a serious actress. She won the Academy Award for Best Actress, standing on stage in a sheer glittering gown that symbolized everything she was: unconventional, fearless, and unforgettable. In the span of 2 decades, Cher had gone from teenage runaway to Oscar-winning superstar, breaking barriers across both music and film. But this wasn't just a story of success. Each reinvention carried with it new battles against the industry, against expectations, and eventually against the people closest to her. For all the awards and accolades, the most shocking parts of Cher's life were happening off stage, far away from the cameras, and soon the world would see a side of her that fame could never protect. For most artists, one era of success is enough to cement their legacy, but Cher refused to be locked into any box. She didn't just ride the wave of the 60s and 70s. She built an empire by constantly changing shape. Every decade brought a new version of Cher, and each one broke through the boundaries of what a pop star was supposed to be. In the 1970s, when many thought her career would fade after her divorce from Sonny Bono, she shocked everyone by returning with solo records that topped the charts. Her voice carried songs like Half-Breed and Dark Lady into the #1 spot, proving she didn't need anyone to define her. But it wasn't just about staying relevant. It was about dominance. Cher became the only solo artist to land a #1 single in 7 consecutive decades, a feat no one else in the industry has ever matched. From the flower power era to disco, rock, dance pop, and even modern EDM, she mastered them all. When others her age slowed down, she sped up. In 1998, at the age of 52, she released Believe, a song that didn't just hit #1 worldwide, but also changed the sound of pop forever with its pioneering use of auto-tune. That one track sold over 11 million copies and reinvented Cher for an entirely new generation. And she didn't stop there. In 2023, nearly 6 decades after her first hit, she dropped DJ Play a Christmas Song, which climbed to #1 on the Billboard Dance Electronic chart. With that single, she extended her record-breaking streak, becoming the only artist alive to achieve such dominance across 7 decades. It was more than just another hit. It was a message to the world. Cher wasn't a relic of the past. She was still rewriting music history in real time. Her resilience became part of her legend. When critics tried to dismiss her, she pushed harder. When the industry told her she was too old, she redefined what it meant to age in the spotlight. Reinvention wasn't just a strategy for Cher, it was her survival mechanism. But as dazzling as her career seemed, the spotlight couldn't cover up the cracks forming in her personal life. Behind the glittering records and red carpet triumphs, Cher was fighting a much darker battle, one that began inside her own home. To the outside world, Cher and Sonny Bono looked like the perfect couple. They were young, glamorous, and unstoppable, selling millions of records and starring in one of television's most watched variety shows. Fans saw laughter, music, and romance, but what they didn't see was the darker reality that Cher herself has only recently revealed. Behind the stage lights and scripted banter, Sonny held a grip on her life that went far beyond music. In her memoir, Cher describes how their marriage was far from the fairy tale the public imagined. He was controlling, often isolating her from friends, and secretly arranging business deals that left her with almost nothing. Through a company called Cher Enterprises, Sonny kept 95% of everything they earned in his name, leaving her with just scraps of the empire she had helped to build. The betrayal didn't stop at finances. Cher has spoken about how she was manhandled during the relationship, and how Sonny's actions left her trapped in a cycle she struggled to escape. He burned her possessions, had multiple affairs, and treated her less like an equal partner and more like a commodity. To the public, they were America's sweethearts. Behind closed doors, she was fighting to breathe under his control. It was a toxic mix of love, business, and manipulation that almost broke her spirit. But even in her darkest moments, Cher's instinct for survival pushed her forward. She plotted her escape carefully, knowing that if she didn't break free, she would lose herself entirely. When their marriage finally collapsed in the mid-1970s, the headlines painted it as a messy celebrity divorce. But for Cher, it was liberation. It meant starting over at the height of fame, without the man who had shaped her career but also nearly destroyed her independence. Her next marriage, to rock legend Gregg Allman, seemed like the polar opposite. Fiery, passionate, and fueled by the chaos of the 1970s rock scene. But that relationship came with its own turmoil. Just 9 days after they married, Cher filed for divorce, citing his spiraling drug and alcohol use. They would reunite briefly and even have a son together, Elijah Blue Allman, but the marriage never found steady ground. These marriages taught Cher hard lessons about love, power, and survival. They also revealed a pattern. The stronger she became in her career, the more complicated her private life grew. While escaping Sonny's control marked the beginning of her independence, it also set the stage for the battles she would fight outside her home, against powerful men who thought they could control her on Hollywood sets. If her marriages tested her resilience at home, Hollywood tested her strength in public. Cher's rise as an actress wasn't a smooth climb. It was a battlefield. In 1985, she starred in Mask, a powerful drama about a boy with a facial deformity. The film earned her rave reviews, but behind the scenes, the experience was brutal. Cher has said director Peter Bogdanovich belittled her, screamed at her, and even touched her without her consent. Decades later, she still didn't hold back, calling him an a-hole and a pig. It was a raw reminder of how little respect even an Oscar-winning woman could receive in a male-dominated industry. Her clashes didn't end there. On the set of Mermaids in 1990, Cher butted heads with director Frank Oz, famous for bringing life to Miss Piggy and Yoda. Their working relationship soured so badly that Cher gave the studio an ultimatum: either he goes or I do. In the end, Oz was forced out, replaced by another director just to keep Cher on board. It was a shocking move in Hollywood, where stars rarely had the leverage to push a director off a film. But Cher had proven that she wasn't going to play by the industry's rules. If a man disrespected her or underestimated her, she fought back, and usually she won. These feuds could have ruined her reputation, but instead they reinforced her legacy as someone who refused to be silenced or controlled. Every fight, every standoff, became another piece of the mythos that surrounded her. For some, she was difficult. For others, she was fearless. But whether she was clashing with directors or defying industry gatekeepers, Cher showed the world that her independence wasn't negotiable. Still, while she could take on Hollywood's biggest names and walk away unscathed, the battles that cut the deepest were the ones closer to home. Because when her son Elijah's personal struggles spilled into the public eye, Cher found herself in the center of a storm that blurred the line between family tragedy and tabloid scandal. For all of Cher's success, her private life has been marked by heartbreak, and nowhere is that more evident than in her relationship with her son, Elijah Blue Allman. Born in 1976 to Cher and rocker Greg Allman, Elijah grew up in the shadow of two legendary parents. His childhood was anything but ordinary, and as he entered adulthood, he began battling the same demons that plagued his father. Struggles with addiction and instability haunted him for decades, leading to multiple stints in rehab and public relapses that were splashed across headlines. In late 2023, the family's turmoil exploded into a sensational scandal. Court documents filed by Elijah's estranged wife claimed that Cher had gone to shocking lengths to try to save her son. According to the filing, Cher allegedly hired 4 men to abduct Elijah from a New York hotel room and force him into treatment. The story sounded like a plot ripped from a movie, an international superstar resorting to covert measures to protect her child. The allegations spread quickly, dominating tabloids and fueling a storm of speculation. Was Cher capable of such an extreme move, or was this just another messy chapter in a bitter separation? Cher herself denied the claim, calling it a private family matter. She explained that her only concern was her son's well-being, that she had been fighting desperately to keep him alive and safe. The truth behind the allegation remains unclear, but it revealed a devastating reality. Even someone as powerful and wealthy as Cher couldn't shield her family from pain, addiction, and chaos. In December 2023, she even filed for temporary conservatorship over Elijah, citing fears that he couldn't manage his health or finances. Though the petition was eventually withdrawn, the battle underscored the depth of her worry and the lengths she was willing to consider in order to protect him. For fans, it was a shocking reminder that Cher's life offstage wasn't just glamorous. It was messy, complicated, and filled with the same heartbreak that millions of ordinary families face when addiction takes hold of someone they love. What made her story different was how public it all became. One of the world's most famous women was fighting her most painful war in front of cameras, courts, and gossip columns. And even as the headlines swirled, Cher never hid her fear or her frustration. She stood by her son, no matter how ugly the coverage became. But rather than let the tabloids tell her story, Cher decided to seize control of it herself. By 2024, Cher had lived through enough reinventions, battles, and heartbreaks to fill a lifetime of books. And finally, she decided to tell her story her way. In November of that year, she released Cher the Memoir, Part 1, the first half of a 2-volume autobiography that promised to leave nothing off the table. For decades, fans had speculated about what really happened behind the glittering facade, but in her own words, Cher exposed the truth with a bluntness that stunned even longtime followers. She admitted her first sexual experience had been an act of revenge, something she quickly called overrated and empty. She pulled no punches in her retelling of Sonny Bono's betrayal, detailing how he manipulated finances, left her nearly penniless despite years of shared success, and controlled every aspect of her life until she broke free. She revisited her turbulent marriage to Greg Allman, opening up about his addiction struggles and the chaos that nearly destroyed them both. The book didn't just cover her personal life. It tore open chapters of her career that had long been clouded in rumor. She spoke candidly about her clashes with Hollywood directors, confirming what many had whispered for years, that she was forced to fight constantly for respect in an industry dominated by men who underestimated her. What critics might have dismissed as diva behavior, Cher reframed as survival. Every argument, every feud, every standoff was proof that she refused to let anyone silence her or dictate her path. But what made the memoir so powerful wasn't just the scandals, it was the vulnerability. Cher admitted the toll these battles took, the loneliness that often followed public triumph, and the private grief that came with watching loved ones self-destruct. Her words were sharp, but also deeply human, pulling back the curtain on a woman who had been painted as untouchable for so long. She wasn't afraid to admit fear, doubt, or mistakes, and that honesty made her story more compelling than any gossip column ever could. Even at an age when most stars have long retreated from the spotlight, Cher refuses to fade. In 2023, she shocked fans with a surprise onstage duet alongside Cyndi Lauper at the Hollywood Bowl. At 79, she commanded the stage with the same presence that made her a superstar decades earlier, reminding audiences that time had done little to dull her fire. Cher's story isn't just one of stardom. It's a saga of survival. From a runaway teenager who turned into half of America's favorite duo, to a global superstar who conquered music, film, and fashion, she has done what no one else has, stayed relevant, powerful, and unapologetic across 7 decades. But the real story lies beyond the awards and the glitter. It's in the betrayals she endured, the feuds she fought, and the scandals that nearly broke her family. She stood up to controlling men, outlasted toxic relationships, and proved to Hollywood that she was more than just a pretty face on stage. What makes Cher different isn't just her talent. It's her refusal to quit. At nearly 80 years old, she's still breaking records, still shocking fans, and still setting the rules on her own terms. With Part 2 of her memoir set for release in 2026, just as she reaches another milestone birthday, the world knows the most shocking revelations may still be ahead. One thing is certain: Cher isn't finished. She has lived a life too bold, too chaotic, and too defiant to ever truly fade away. Whether you admire her resilience, her reinvention, or her sheer audacity, her story is far from over. And as the next chapter approaches, the only guarantee is that Cher will tell it her way, loud, unapologetic, and unforgettable.